afterward. So, here we are at the end of the first book, but only at the very beginning of the adventure. The story continues in imPerfect Curse, the second book. You can also read the prequel, An Imperfect Trap, for free by signing up for my newsletter, which involves a Nain Rouge, a deadly escape game, and a very pissed off Aisha. There's also an audiobook of that. If you've enjoyed this book, then please consider leaving a review. It makes all the difference to independent authors and actually helps me with a get-out clause on the Faustian bargain I signed at the Crossroads to get the magic pen that allowed me to write this book. If you don't want me to be dragged off screaming to the inferno, and if nothing else, pity all the poor souls forced to spend eternity with me if I am, then hit those star buttons. And if you can manage it, type a few words of review. Even should go straight to hell would be brill. But I want to take a minute to tell you about the world itself. I've done the best I can to keep things as accurate, historically and geographically speaking, as possible, with only minor tweaks where the story required. For example, the Siege of Lavore is absolutely true, as is the burning of the 400 perfects. The subsequent explosion of the Great Hall, less so, but necessary for my part of the story. And I've not seen any documents saying it didn't explode or explode magically, so who knows? Perhaps people just forgot to say. Simple thing to forget. I'm no historian, so mistakes may exist. Please don't hesitate to drop me an email at chris@cnrowan.com to let me know if there are any clangers. I'm aware there's now some debate in the academic circles about whether the good people really existed, or if it was simply a term for the form of Christianity that existed prior to the formalization of Pope Innocent, whether his paranoia about Qatari was why they ended up with the label. There's plenty of arguments both ways, and this version worked best for the story I wanted to tell. For those who want a well-told, well-researched, and not too heavy-going introduction to the Cathars and the Albigensian Crusade, I recommend A Perfect Heresy by Stephen O'Shea. It's a fabulous laying out of a truly peculiar story from history. As for the characters in the book, Aisha Kandisha's story, or legend, is true to a point. She is the bogey woman of Moroccan culture, and there is evidence she really existed as a noblewoman in Al Jadida, just south of Casablanca, who used her feminine wiles to seduce Portuguese raiders into a trap. The rest is my addition, although the Druze are a true religious sect and still exist in Lebanon and Syria today. Isaac the Blind is also a real historical figure and creator of Kabbalah. Again, that really was happening just up the road from Toulouse at the same time as the Cathars and the Crusade in Montpellier. Jacob, his brother, is my creation. Nithael and Nanael are two of the named Bene Elohim of Judaism. Arnold Almeric, the butcher of Beziers, is a real character and was a real bastard by all accounts. The story of Beziers, while perhaps apocryphal, is certainly attributed to him. Simon de Montfort is also a real person who rose to prominence from the middling ranks of the French nobility to incomprehensible glory during the Crusade. Perhaps he had someone magical helping him out. Speaking of, Papanicitas is also a genuine character and a genuine mystery. He didn't reappear for the Siege of Lavore, but he did arrive from Constantinople at the time when the good people were formalizing their beliefs. He persuaded them towards a firmly dualistic belief, which arguably set them on a coalition course with the religious authorities, and got them all to take a new consolamentum to become perfect again because of doubts over the veracity of the original one. Then, suddenly, he disappeared under a cloud of intrigue and the rumour of dalliances with married women, meaning everyone had to go through the whole consolamentum for a third time. He never popped up in known history again, and what happened after he left the Languedoc is just another of the strange unknowns about this peculiar character. Perhaps I did him an injustice by making him the villain of the piece, but there remain many unanswered questions about him. I just added a few more. Historians will note I left out a whole array of colourful characters from the Albigensian Crusades, not least Dominic Guzman, the austere priest who later founded the Dominicans, an order that would go on to create the Inquisition. He was in mind to be the original religious villain of my story, but research showed him to be a considerably nicer character than Almeric, despite what happened later in his name. Also, the original drafts of the historical flashbacks were packed full of endless real people from the Siege of Lavore, Guzman included, but were confusing and overly weighty because of it. Things needed to be trimmed to keep the story moving along, and Dominic became one of them. Sozdom. Lucar Coil, the snail, is a real mythological creature, and the town of Astang genuinely sits on top of the hill that he's believed to live beneath. The Pont de Grammont is real too, and so is the Israelite cemetery. I stumbled across it driving back from Grammont to Astang. When I saw the sign, I had to follow it. Finding these peculiar slabs stuck into the hillside with houses just across the way, bearing Jewish family names from hundreds of years ago, and the ruins of the castle of Bidash on the horizon is a moment that will linger with me for a very long time, and I thought it a fitting place for the showdown to conclude. Frank isn't real, or based on anything but my twisted imagination. Thank goodness. Everywhere else in the story is a genuine place. Lastronef really exists and really is as cool and wonderful an establishment as I described it. Hell, I probably didn't do it justice. The only creation is the Café Imperorad. I couldn't find anywhere suitable when I visited, and I really wanted it to embody that typical French cafe, particularly like the ones I used to come across in the Bouteau Caille in Paris. The cafe and the waiter are definitely very Parisian and very familiar to me. Remember, if you want to stay in touch with me, I'd love to hear from you. Drop me an email or a message on social media. I'm on Instagram, but most active on Facebook, and will always respond to DMs. You can also join CN Rowan's imPerfect Gang, my Facebook readers group, which is incredibly active and full of hilarious and lovable loonies, aka my kind of people. That's it. My justification, or mea culpa, whichever way is more appropriate to view it. The story continues in imPerfect Curse, where we find out how things are going to go for Paul and the gang. Spoiler. Badly. The answer is badly. Let's hope they find a way out of the trouble they get themselves into. The End. imPerfect Magic is book 1 in the imPerfect Cathar series, written and read by CN Rowan. All rights reserved by CN Rowan and Main Rock Publishing.